Hi everyone, I'm Rafa and welcome to my channel where I talk about startups, wealth, and living a purposeful life. In this video, I'm going to share 2 proven strategies that's going to let you retire in your 30s. But warning, both of these paths will require you to build a business. So if you don't want to do that and you're quite happy with the status quo and staying with your job, that's okay too, but this video is not for you. But first of all, what do I mean by retirement? Well, retirement isn't even the right word anymore. It's something that kind of existed in our parents' generation. What if I said to you, why don't you pay yourself a salary from a pension at the age of 65 after grinding at it for 40 years in the same job? How does that sound? Certainly not my cup of tea. Retirement in the modern context is about achieving financial independence, about not having to dedicate vast amounts of your waking hours just to make a proportional amount of money to support your living. And most importantly, it should be about freeing up time so that you can live a life of meaning, purpose, and freedom, all whilst you're still young. Does this sound like the kind of retirement that you want to have? Let's do it. Before we get into the strategies, it's important to define your retirement. What kind of life do you actually want to lead? Scrolling through endless YouTube videos of $50 million Calabasas party pads, or even that £30 million London penthouse is not helpful here. And I do that like never. Certainly not on a daily basis. Instead, what is useful is to actually define the minimum best case for yourself. In other words, if you're not a runaway success ranking at the 0.1 percentile of whatever you do, how does a meaningful, productive, happy, comfortable life still look like to you? So before you continue, I'd like you to take a pause and to just think about what your typical day here would look like, and very importantly, what is your identity and your role in society? Okay, so now that we've defined what our ideal retirement looks like, it's time to talk shop. Strategy 1, realizing a high-value liquidity event. To put it crudely, strategy 1 is about generating cash, a lot of it. Creating a single, big, meaningful cash payout for yourself. Now, there's many events, liquidity events, that can help you get there. This is a list of things that you could be looking at. Now, I'm not an investment professional, so do not take investment advice from me, and neither am I going to be able to help you with inheritance. However, one thing that I can talk to is building a business. And this is where a lot of entrepreneurs make a fundamental mistake. They do not plan for exit from day one. If you're pursuing strategy 1 as a way to create wealth and to plan for a healthy, productive lifestyle coming out of it, you need to have the end in mind. If you do not do that, then chances are you're building a business that isn't very clear how it's going to generate this cash, who the buyers of the service could be, and every single day when you turn up at work, you could be generating value, but just not the right type of value. I once met this entrepreneur and he was building this HR software thing. And I was like, oh God, this is so boring. It's been done to death, what's the point? Lada, lada, lada. But this is what I learned from him, and this is what I would have told myself if I could go back in time. This guy subsequently exited his business for $4 million after just 2 years of work. And that is respectable because he owned nearly all of it, and he was able to therefore generate this massive liquidity event for himself, which then opens options. Now, on the other hand, lots of startup founders think they have to sort of go through the VC fundraising journey to prove themselves a success. Yes, it's great if you kind of show up on Forbes and get all these prizes. However, by the end of multiple rounds of fundraising, your equity level drops. And by the time, if you even get to an exit, you're left with this much equity in the business. So how much is it actually going to be worth? That's really something to ask yourself about at the very start. Now, there's nothing wrong with building a VC-backed business where you go through multiple rounds of funding, but just be extremely conscious that if you are pursuing strategy 1, whether or not this actually will result in the liquidity event that you want. One thing I ought to mention as well is there are still sort of middle grounds that can be a happy balance between the two. So if your company is able to generate a high valuation because of fast growth and it's VC-backed, VC-fueled, then what can actually happen in the middle is that the founder can sell a portion of their shares at a fundraising event. And this then allows them to cash out a little bit, not too much, but enough so that there is some liquidity event that is happening. So strategy 1 is your high risk, high reward strategy. Let's now move on to strategy 2, which is increasing your income per hour worked. Do you know all this side hustle advice that you hear nowadays about like working multiple jobs and all that kind of stuff? Well, that's all kind of just getting to this. It's a subset of what I mean by generating a high income per hour worked. And note the keyword here is hours worked, not hours worked. This is important because if you are having to spend hours just commuting to a client to get something done, you need to factor that time in for this strategy to work. What's even more important is to bear in mind that anything that you pursue in this strategy comes at an opportunity cost to another thing that you could be doing. So let's say you put up a gig on Fiverr and now you're making $300 per month. Not too bad. And let's say you have to put in 20 hours per week to get that done. Well, this 20 hours now comes as an opportunity cost for something else that you could have been doing with the same time instead. And what's even sadder is that your hourly rate is unlikely to dramatically increase on Fiverr in a short space of time. So now you've boxed yourself into a perpetual $300–400 a month. So what is the right way to go about generating this high income per hour worked? I split that into 2 steps. Step 1 is to actually get a stable income source that pays the bills and a little bit more. And the important thing here is to cap the absolute amount of time that you have to spend doing this to something like no more than 35 hours per week. This is important because by doing so, you will still leave yourself with about 15 to 20 hours spare, even if you wanted to have a fairly chilled lifestyle where you can meet up with friends, go out once or twice a week. This step is crucial. Having 5 side hustles that pay you the same amount is not the same thing because those side hustles could be unstable, and also the constant juggling and the context switching and the mental burden could all just be a little bit too much to make your lifestyle conducive for productive things. Being in a constant state of high anxiety and panic? Not helpful for generating productive sources of income. Oh, and before I reveal step 2, I got a bonus strategy for you. Tap pause real quick and go down below to subscribe to my channel for more honest shares and useful tips on building a company and building wealth. All right, well, let's get back to it, to step 2 of the strategy. So step 2 of the strategy is looking at building supplementary income sources. So here I'm gonna assume you're not sitting on $1 million of cash, in which case investment might be your friend. If you're still working your way to your first million, then what you would want to do instead is to pursue one of the following. Either build a service where you can bill for a high hourly rate, and this is hours worked, remember, or sell a product in a scalable way. If you're selling a service, make sure you factor in all the prep time and the travel time that's associated with actually delivering the work itself. So for example, if someone paid you $75 to do a piece of work for an hour, but it takes you 2 hours to travel back and forth, well, your hourly rate's no longer $75, is it? It's $25. Barely worth it. So look for things that you can do remotely, and some suggestions on freelancing work that you could do remotely include the following things. Selling products, on the other hand, is a whole new kettle of fish, and it'll involve a lot more upfront investment of your time to choose or develop the product, as well as to build the correct sales channels. The obvious choices here are things like dropshipping or cross-border e-commerce. Whatever you choose something that you enjoy doing, because ultimately, this could end up being the ticket that lets you leave behind your full-time job. So you've made it this far. Which one's more for you? Was it strategy 1 or strategy 2? That was actually a trick question, because in actual fact, you can use both strategies in combination with each other to maximize the effect. The exact mix that you choose will be influenced heavily by your own risk profile. So this could be due to factors such as your age, your family circumstances, whether you have kids or whether you're caregiving, and also your existing levels of wealth. Of course, there's also the interest and motivation piece as well. So what's my take on it? Well, if you like high risk, high reward, if you're in for the ride, if you love excitement, I'd go for strategy 1. And this is essentially what I did in my early 20s. But after talking to dozens of entrepreneurs at various stages and at varying levels of success, what I actually realized is many people would rather opt for strategy 2 if they could do it all over again. So my recommendation, if you were to start from scratch, is actually to pursue strategy 2 first, until you have generated a steady income stream, been able to create a life of sustainably low living expenses, have achieved some life milestones that you want to, and have saved up a good amount. From there, you can then flip over to strategy 1. Building wealth is such a huge topic, and I've got so much more to share with you guys. This is hard work. I might actually just go back to scrolling through luxury mansions in Calabasas instead. But all joking aside, I'd love to hear from you guys. What strategies have you tried to implement to build wealth in the past? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And actually, what has been the highest hourly rate you've ever achieved? Leave them in the comments below. I'll see you down there. And for now, have an absolutely smashing day.